Welcome to the Lessons for Luca podcast. I'm your host, Michael DeSanti, author of New Man Emerging, transformational trainer and coach, and most importantly, I'm Luca's dad. In this episode, I want to focus really on one thing, and really what this journey of self-discovery, of personal growth, of transformation, really what it's all about. In a time, in a culture, in a society where you are constantly being marketed to, reminded of, sold, told, that you're not enough until you accomplish something, you're not enough until you gain something, you're not enough until you acquire something, you're not enough until you have something. In a culture that's constantly reminding you that you're not enough, self-acceptance and self-love is an act of rebellion. And to be able to start and look and be honest with the man in the mirror and begin to accept that man, begin, dare I say, even love that man. That's really what this journey is all about. That's what the journey of self-discovery is. That's a journey of transformation. It's not some future destination where all your troubles and challenges go away, where you arrive at some summit and all of a sudden life has this biblical clarity that this is why I'm here. Sometimes that's the case, but really that journey is actually about looking at, facing, being honest with the man in the mirror and accepting him for who he is. All of him. Self-acceptance is the embracing of who I am in my totality without judgment or without condition. So that I could accept that the part of me, that there is a light in me and there's a darkness in me. There's success in me, there's failures in me, there's gifts in me, and there's also flaws in me. And it's not about ignoring one and only focusing on the other. It's about understanding that who I am is a holistic makeup of radical contradictions and radical considerations and radical complexities. And actually accepting that that's who I am. Not from a place of complacency or resignation, meaning, well, that's just who I am and nothing I can do about it. Rather, self-acceptance is a place that invites us into radical honesty. The spiritual game, the transformation game, the personal development game isn't about escaping our humanity. It's about fully embracing our humanity. And our humanity is complicated. Our humanness is both divine and flawed at the same time. And self-acceptance is this ability to look at the man in the mirror, accept the man in the mirror, love the man in the mirror, love who I am, and also love who I am becoming, who living into, who I'm evolving into, the character that I am, the influence that I am. And loving who I'm actually evolving and becoming into, not from a place of lack or from a place of scarcity or from a place of one day I'll arrive, but actually being here in this moment, looking at the man in the mirror and saying, I'm accepting and even loving who I am and who I'm becoming and what I'm demonstrating. And so that level of self-acceptance takes my past, it takes my present, it takes my future. There's a non-resistance to it all, that there's an acceptance to it all, that there's a peace to it all, that there's a sincerity to it all. Understanding I have blind spots, I have limitations, I have flaws, I have shadows, and there's a part of me that yearns to grow, that yearns to contribute, that yearns to demonstrate from a place of full self-expression, that all of those things can coexist at the same time, that they could be complicated and I could accept my complications. Too often, I find that people fall on one end of the spectrum where we become resigned. This is the past that I have. These are the flaws that I have. These are my limitations, and there's nothing I could do about it. And we live with this place of inevitability. That's just the way that it is. It's just the way that I am. Nothing I can do about it. The opposite end of that spectrum is I'm going to ignore all my flaws and I'm going to bulldoze through them, and I'm only going to focus on what I'm good at, my accomplishments, getting to that horizon, getting to that summit in life. Yet we don't realize the amount of collateral damage and the amount of recklessness that we actually leave in our wake, in our relationships, in our health, and ultimately in our joy and in our peace of mind. Both are unsustainable because both are extreme. When we bring them to the middle and we say, can I be present with who I was, what I've learned, what I've messed up at, my failures, my old experiences, my old mistakes, and accept all that while at the same time be grateful for and in pursuit of what I desire and who I desire myself to become. And that soup is complicated. Unconsciously on those extremes, we usually take some posture, unconscious posture of resistance. And so I either, resist my potential because I'm limited to my past, or I ignore my flaws, I ignore my blind spots, I ignore my shadow. I become so righteous that I just bulldoze into the future, and live by this sense of the ends justify the means. And I don't realize that the actions I'm taking are actually unsustainable or unhealthy or even harmful. And so bringing that to the center and allowing for those complications to be there in a place of non-resistance or a place of non-judgment, it doesn't let me off the hook from my past. It invites me to be curious and learn from my mistakes of the past while navigating and opening up new potential and possibility of my future. It also pulls back some of that pride, some of that bullishness, some of that stubbornness that says, wait a second, maybe there's other things to consider or other people to consider as I actually generate forward. And so that self-acceptance is that ability to see myself in a holistic or total embrace of all of my sides, all of my contradictions and all of my complexities, and actually realize that that's what makes me me. That's what makes me human. And so as we examine that level of self-acceptance, a lot of it invites us back to our point of origin and take a look at where have I picked up some of my defaults. And those defaults actually present themselves in what are called attachment styles. And those attachment styles, the most common ones are secure attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, or disorganized attachment. And really what attachment styles are simply the way that my nervous system has practiced the messaging of how it operates or where it defaults around closeness. Secure attachment style is, and a lot of that messaging and programming and practice comes from early on in our point of origin, mainly with our caregivers. Secure attachment style is that my nervous system responds to closeness with ownership, effective skills of communicating where boundaries are being crossed or where needs aren't being met, and that I could communicate in that secure attachment or in that secure response what I need, what's missing, where I play a part, where I'm participating, how I'm generating it. That's a secure attachment. And that creates a really stable environment for partnership with others, but also partnership with ourselves. That I can look at my complexities and say, oh, this is where I fell short. This is where I'm really excelling. This is where my needs aren't being met. This is where priorities are being ignored. And I get to recalibrate or adapt, become flexible again because I have greater commitments. That's a secure attachment style, whether it's personal or interpersonal. Avoidant attachment style is that as my nervous system responds to closeness, it actually is programmed to interact with closeness as a place of threat, a place of taking a risk, that intimacy is a risk, that closeness and vulnerability is a risk, and I'm at risk of losing something here. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. That's the avoidant attachment style, that as things get close, as things get intimate, as things get complicated, as things get messy, I avoid or run or remove myself from it. That's an avoidant attachment style. Anxious attachment style is that as things get close and intimate, vulnerable, that my anxious attachment style clings to it and doesn't want to lose it, doesn't want to lose the closeness because it craves that closeness but it doesn't really have the skill set to allow that closeness to ebb and flow or to breathe a bit. And so it responds to not closeness as a threat, but distance as a threat. That maybe if my partner is struggling or challenged or in a mood, and as they pull away a bit, I actually look at the pulling away as a threat. And so rather than allow that space to breathe, I cling to it and become exhaustive or overwhelming or clingy or needy. And the fourth is the disorganized attachment style, which is my nervous system is really actually oriented and programmed to chaos. Particularly that comes from a chaotic upbringing, caretakers and caregivers that were unpredictable or absent, abusive, that over time, in order to cope in chaos, I actually made the chaos familiar. And what that looks like internally is we feel more comfortable in chaos than we do in peace, monotony, mastery, and the mundane. So we unconsciously will ignite chaos because that's actually where our nervous system feels more comfortable. It's not healthy, but it's familiar. So we'll do that in ourselves with self-sabotage. We'll also do it in relationships where as things get close, I need some level of chaos that I say is exciting. And then that excitement is, I become attached to that love style, and that looks like love bombing and constant roller coaster of emotion. And then we just call that love. It's not sustainable, not necessarily healthy, but that's actually how the nervous system responds in that attachment style. I want to talk about mostly the avoidant attachment style and the anxious attachment style, because those tend to be the ones where we actually trip ourselves up the most. We'll talk a little bit too about disorganized as well, because that really leads to a level of self-sabotage, but that becomes a little more obvious, I think, for people than the avoidant or the anxious attachment style. The avoidant attachment style, I call my sovereign, and the anxious attachment style, I call my romantic. That avoidant attachment style, the sovereign, as things get close and things get intimate, part of that old programming, the underlying fear is that as I get close to something, as I get close to someone, the risk in there is that I'm going to lose my sense of self, that I'm going to lose my sense of autonomy, that I'm going to lose my sense of freedom. And so commitment, which is a requirement of mastery, actually looks like a risk or a threat. And so as things get too close, things get too deep, things get too meaningful, as I feel like I'm being more vulnerable, more intimate, really putting myself out there, I actually have that as a sense of loss. And what I don't want to lose is my sense of self. And so the avoidant attachment style pulls away, or it runs from the conflict, it runs from the intimacy, it runs from the closeness, and flavors it with, I would just be better on my own. I know more than other people do. I could let me just fix this on my own. I don't have time for other people's issues and problems. And so the deep underlying fear is the fear of loss of self, or the fear of sovereignty, or the fear of autonomy. The opposite of that is the anxious attachment style, which is as they crave closeness, and as things get close, they actually squeeze harder, squeeze tighter. They become clingy because the fear is the fear of loss. It's really unconsciously, it's the fear of abandonment. And so that fear of abandonment tries to hold on. But in the holding on, it actually creates this suffocation. And it only makes the avoidant or the sovereign attachment style want to run even further. I bring this up really around relationship, but the journey of self-acceptance is to actually turn those projections of our relationships back inwardly. Because if the fear of the sovereign is loss of sense of self, and the fear of the romantic is a fear of abandonment, a fear of loss of others approval, others affections, others attention. When we turn that back towards ourself and we go on this journey of self-acceptance, what we're really understanding and aiming at is we need to reconcile within ourselves. For the sovereign, it's the reconciling our selfishness. And for the romantic, it's the reconciling of our loneliness. And so for the sovereign to recognize my selfishness is to say, like, wait, as I'm trudging forward, barreling forward, advancing forward, where am I being selfish? Where am I not pausing to meet the needs of my partner, my children, others, my community? Because somehow if I just get mine, all will be fine. That the ends justify the means and everyone else could figure it out for themselves. And it creates this posture of selfishness. Sovereigns aren't necessarily aware of it because the biggest threat and risk is I don't want to lose my sense of individuality or my sense of who I am, my sense of autonomy. And so if you don't get me, you're gone. What happens is that doesn't create any level of depth of intimacy in relationships because it almost becomes like one wrong move and I'm out. But as we turn that back on ourselves, we realize that the projection is I'm uncomfortable with my sense of selfishness. And that part of me that's void and missing is actually the part of me that is more effective in contribution, more effective in gathering, more effective in a sense of belonging, more effective in deep relationships. That's the invitation that the sovereign is called to. But because of our blind spots and because of our righteousness, many sovereigns get to the mountaintop of their life and they look around and they're all alone. They've burned their bridges to get there. The sovereigns are more of the people that as they get further in life and even further in success, further in accomplishment, they look back and they realize I really destroyed a lot of relationships to get here, or I ignored or didn't pay attention to the people that really cheered me on, cared for me, wanted to be part of my life because I had horse blinders on, that my worth, my sense of worth and my sense of self-love and self-acceptance was in some future accomplishment. To the romantic, reconciling our loneliness is critical because to the romantic, to the extreme, the romantic can become clingy, can become needy, can become suffocating and overwhelming. Because what the romantic does is we define our worth with the relationship, with having you, with you being part of my life, with you liking me, giving me attention, giving me affection, being in your favor. And when you distance yourself or go through a challenge or go through a struggle and you create a little bit of space, that activates the fear inside the romantic that I'm losing love, that you're walking away, you're leaving me. And that fear of being alone or being abandoned is so much greater than developing a bit of and a sense of sovereignty or sense of self for the romantic that says, hey, I'm secure enough in who I am that you could take some space, you could take a little distance, you could have a breath, you could take a breather. And rather than that fear kicks in and it's, please don't leave, please get closer, please don't hurt me, don't break this, don't end this. And that level of loneliness becomes the operating system. And so what happens in our relationships with others and our relationship with ourselves is if we're unwilling to reconcile and accept certain defaults, certain point of origin, certain past experiences that have created these defaults in us, either the default of, that rebellious sovereign or that default of that clingy romantic, we're never going to actually reconcile where our power is. Power lies in accepting those defaults, understanding those defaults, and then working to become more adequate at them, learning a language for them, learning a skill set for them. The reason I bring up relationships to look or examine certain inward trends and operating systems is because relationships are typically the domain where you can't hide them. You could procrastinate your health domain, you could procrastinate your spiritual domain, you could procrastinate your wealth domain. But when it comes to intimate relationships, there's not really a place to hide that inner default. That inner default is so conditioned to either want to avoid and run or get so close that I become suffocating. And they become these friction points where we lose communication. And it's easy in relationship to turn that on to our partner and say, it's because you're this way. But the journey of self-acceptance and the journey of self-love is to turn that mirror back on myself and say, where do I get to reconcile my loneliness? And where do I get to reconcile my selfishness? Where am I in this extreme sovereign that's obviously going to cause friction for a relationship, because it's almost like the sovereign will always have one foot in and one foot out. Or where do I get to reconcile my loneliness as the romantic, because I have not only 2 feet in, but I'm neck deep in. And that the experience or the idea of living without you is unfathomable and unthinkable. Those create this friction, and they have 2 different languages, because at the heart of who we are, we have 2 different values there. And so the value of significance and the value of a sense of belonging, we want them to ebb and flow. We want them to have high and low tides. We want them to be malleable. There's a great line from one of my favorite poets, Khalil Gibran, when he talks about marriage in his book, The Prophet. And he says the relationship is like 2 pillars of a temple. If those 2 pillars are too close together, then the temple actually gets weak. And if those 2 pillars are too far apart, the temple gets weak. Understanding the right distance, the right geometry of those pillars is actually what makes the temple strong. Well, in that journey of self-acceptance, I understand, where does my sovereignty, my significance, and where does my romantic, my sense of belonging, where do they actually have a healthy tension? Where do they have a healthy interaction and a healthy distance? And that journey of self-acceptance and that journey of self-love actually makes us better partners in relationship. It makes us better citizens in our community. It makes us better members of our family. It makes us better friends of our brothers and our sisters, because I've turned that projection around and I started to face the man in the mirror with honesty. Where do I get to reconcile my loneliness? Where do I get to reconcile my selfishness? And how do I temper them into a place where I realize here I'm being prideful and I'm being selfish. I have horse blinders. And where am I here coming from a place of insecurity, a place of clinging, a place of neediness, a place of suffocation? And how do I temper that back? How do I start to fall in love with being alone or in solitude? That I accept myself for who I am, my complexities holistically, my gifts, my skills, my blind spots, my insecurities. How do I accept them, come to neutral to them, potentially even laugh at them, and eventually, ideally, even fall in love with them? Because there's lessons in all of them. There's lessons in the way we operate in our relationships, the way we interact with ourselves. And so many of us, by projecting outward, we miss this huge lesson, and we miss this huge journey of turning that lens inwardly and saying that this is who I am, flaws and all, that this is who I am, this is what I've been given, and these are my skills, these are my shortcomings, these are my successes, and these are my flaws, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. And what we do is we start to turn a lot of that focus around into ourselves and into what I call the plot of land we've been given. All of us in life have been given a plot of land to till. And most of us, if you think about it, some of us have a particular plot of land. Let's say mine's 10 by 10 and someone else's is 20 by 20. Unfortunately, someone else's is 4 by 4. We spend the majority of our life comparing ourselves, comparing our plot of land to, wow, if I just had his or her plot of land, I'd be so much happier, be so much more fulfilled. Look at how much land he has, or look how much land she has. Or, oh, wow, this poor man, this poor woman, they've only been given a plot of 4 by 4. Who am I to have 10 by 10? And in all of this outward projection and outward focus, as we're constantly comparing externally and outwardly, we're ignoring the plot of land we've been given. We've been ignoring that my plot of land requires attention. It requires weeding and nurturing and sustainable systems and practices. And the goal is to make whatever plot of land I've been given so beautiful that it inspires other people to focus on their own. Only way to do that is through self-acceptance, is through embracing who I am, the totality of who I am, the complexity of who I am, without judgment or without condition. That I could look at the man in the mirror and make a commitment to the man in the mirror that if I don't accept you yet, I'm working on it. I'm working on accepting the man that I see. I'm working on loving the man in the mirror. I'm working on loving the woman in the mirror. I'm starting here first so that I could be a better partner, be a better husband, a better wife, a better spouse, a better father, a better mother, a better friend, a better brother or sister. But I'm going to start with the man in the mirror. I'm going to start with this journey of acceptance, that I could look back in my life, I could look back on my past, as complicated as it is, and all the mistakes that I've made, all the arrows that were thrown at me, all the injustices, and I could actually look at it, pause it, honor it, learn from it, and come to the present moment and look at the man in the mirror and say, because of that, it's made me who I am today, and it alters and influences the trajectory of my future. Because the journey of self-acceptance, again, it's the call to radical honesty. It's now that I see it, now that I'm clear about it, what am I going to do about it? And not from a place of resistance, not from a place of judgment, not from a place of selfishness, not from a place of loneliness, not from some imaginary or fantasy ideal of one day when I am this, everything's going to come together and I'm going to learn how to accept and love myself. It starts now. It starts with the man in the mirror. And that journey is the journey we're constantly on, the journey that we're constantly called to, is accepting who is in the reflection that I see, being honest about it, accepting it, and learning to love it. And so that's the focus of this episode, is to invite all of us to pause those projections and those focuses externally and turn it around on ourselves and take responsibility of where do I get to reconcile my loneliness and my selfishness, and remove any of those blemishes, obstructions, and distortions that keep me from loving the image that I see. So as always, I want to thank you for being on this journey with me. And until we meet again, be a good man, live a good life, and determine each of those for yourself.